It wasn't the harshness of the word itself, but the way Alara let it hang in the pristine kitchen air, crisp, deliberate, and undeniably meant for me. She didn't shout, she merely adjusted the perfect floral arrangement on the counter, her movements slow and precise, as if she were sculpting the perfect insult. "The maintenance is becoming a burden, Lydia," she'd said, using my first name, a clear sign the familial warmth was gone, replaced by corporate efficiency. My son, Marcus, was standing right there, fixated on the sight of coffee dripping into the glass carafe, counting drops, perhaps, or counting the cost of having me near. I remember thinking, with a physical ache in my chest that had nothing to do with my age, how could the son I raised stand silent while his wife dismissed me entirely? The silence after her statement was vast, bigger than the room, filled only with the rhythmic hiss of the espresso machine and the faint tremor in my hands that I tried desperately to hide. I had only been living in their impeccably designed house for 6 months, ever since the doctor told Marcus I needed closer supervision. I had always assumed closer supervision meant family, not a financial spreadsheet. I watched the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in Marcus's jaw. It was the only tell, the only hint of the man who used to call me Mama Bear, the boy who once clung to my skirt. I didn't speak, didn't argue, because I was waiting for him, waiting for my flesh and blood, my only child, to step in and remind her that I was a mother, not a lease agreement. I waited for 1 second, 2, 3. His eyes remained locked on the dark liquid filling the cup. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe, it helps me keep sharing more. Alara finally turned, her gaze cutting into me, colder than the white marble countertop that stretched between us. "It's the utilities, primarily," she continued, moving from emotional cruelty to logistical cruelty, "and the extra space required for all your things. The study was supposed to be Marcus's home office. We've had to delay the renovation." She gestured vaguely towards the entryway, where a row of my carefully packed boxes still sat, unopened, like luggage I was never meant to unpack. I had brought so little, only the essentials, my sewing machine, some books, and the chipped ceramic elephant I'd owned since childhood. I felt the slow burn of rising heat across my face, not of shame, but of righteous, contained fury. What would you have done if your own son stood there, choosing his quiet coffee over your dignity? I reflected, fleetingly, on the day I sold my small cottage, the place where Marcus grew up, believing I was trading space for security, independence for closeness. It felt now like I'd traded my entire existence for this moment of public tabulation. Alara didn't need to yell, her soft, managerial tone was far more devastating. It implied I wasn't worthy of anger, merely an inconvenience to be managed. That's when the first small, stinging insult escalated into a bigger humiliation. She walked over to the kitchen calendar, a huge, pristine whiteboard, and circled a date 2 weeks out. "I've booked a contractor to assess the study space. We need to clear those things out. Permanently." Marcus stirred, finally. He picked up his coffee cup, the sharp, clinking sound of the spoon against the ceramic breaking the tension like a gunshot. He cleared his throat, avoiding my eye, and said, his voice flat and controlled, "Mom, Alara is just trying to be practical. We can put your boxes in the storage unit off-site." Storage unit. The word felt like a lock clicking shut on my life. My personal history, reduced to a fee on a monthly bill. The worst part of his response wasn't that he sided with her, it was the way he used the word practical. It stripped the decision of any feeling, any familial obligation, any memory of the decades I had poured into him. He wasn't choosing his wife over me, he was choosing ease. I thought that was the cruelest cut, the ultimate betrayal, until he took a slow sip of his expensive coffee, met my eyes for the first time, and delivered the true shock. "Honestly, Mom," he added, a hint of tired frustration in his tone, "maybe it's time we talk about some alternative living arrangements, just until we're settled." He suggested finding me an apartment. A small, self-contained unit nearby, he called it. A place where I wouldn't be a burden anymore. And in that moment, seeing the relief wash over Alara's face, I knew my life here was over. The betrayal wasn't just an insult, it was a final eviction notice signed by my own son. The suggestion hit me not like a punch, but like a steady, slow bleed. My mind, usually quick to defend, went strangely quiet, consumed by a deepening dread. I was only able to focus on the feel of the marble under my palm, cold, unyielding, and hard against my skin, reflecting the atmosphere perfectly. The idea of alternative living arrangements, the sterile corporate phrase he'd used, felt like being told I was being relocated, not loved. It was an expulsion masked as practicality. I watched Alara gather the used mugs, her movements precise, almost triumphant, yet still annoyingly gentle, as if she were afraid of breaking something that wasn't already shattered. Her lack of immediate malice was what truly hurt. To her, this wasn't an emotional argument, but merely the closing of a logistical loophole. Do you think I was too forgiving here, in that silence? I saw the calendar date she'd circled, 2 weeks out, when my boxes, my relics, would be gone, and suddenly, the fear of leaving was replaced by the terrifying, profound shock that Marcus was so easily able to discard me. But that wasn't the last surprise my son had planned. I had moved in with them under the condition that I would maintain some small financial independence. I had a modest investment account that I managed, the last tether to the life I had built. That evening, as I was packing a few personal items, the chipped ceramic elephant, the one small thing I couldn't bear to see in a storage unit, I heard Marcus on the phone in the adjacent room, his voice low and cautious. I pressed my ear lightly against the thin wall, not trying to eavesdrop, but unable to ignore the sudden, hushed intensity of his tone. Yes, I know, I told you I'd handle it. The POA is signed. Just transfer the fund to the joint account, and we can start making the initial deposit on the condo tomorrow. The sound of the word POA, power of attorney, was a physical blow. The signature, the one I remembered placing on a stack of forms Marcus had assured me were just for emergency medical authorization, suddenly took on a monstrous new meaning. He had asked me to sign them the day after I arrived, right when I was still feeling disoriented and grateful for his care. I thought that was the end, until he mentioned the fund. My investment fund. The realization that he wasn't just planning to move me out, but had already secured access to my last bit of financial leverage, was a sudden entrance of an unexpected person. The man I thought was my loving son was gone, replaced by a calculating stranger. This wasn't just about utility bills or moving my boxes, this was about the final, complete control over my future, and my son was orchestrating it. The betrayal was now layered, financial and emotional, making the hurt so deep it bypassed tears and settled into a paralyzing stillness. I needed time and space to think, to find the one small chink in their well-crafted plan. I felt a sudden, desperate need to be back in the kitchen, observing, confirming the depth of the deception. I crept silently out of the hallway, the plush carpet muffling my steps, and found Alara sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through her tablet. She was looking at floor plans, likely of the small, self-contained unit they planned to secure with my money. The calm domestic memory twisted into dread surfaced as she looked up, startled, quickly turning the screen away. "Everything all right, Lydia?" she asked, a patronizing smile stretching her lips. "I was just making a grocery list. Planning a nice dinner for Marcus." Her voice was too sweet, too casual. I simply nodded, walking over to the kettle and pouring myself a mug of water, needing the warmth to counteract the bone-deep cold I felt. I took a slow sip, feeling the rough, heat-worn ceramic of the mug against my fingers, the only small, tangible taste touch focus of my attention. "I'm sure it will be lovely," I replied, keeping my voice level. I managed to gather the strength to ask the question I needed answered, without giving away my knowledge. "Marcus mentioned the move might happen quickly. Just out of curiosity, dear, has he finished signing all those financial papers we looked at?" Alara laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, yes. All sorted. Everything is taken care of, Lydia. You don't have to worry about a thing." She didn't realize that in trying to reassure me, she had just confirmed the dark secret I had overheard. She warned me, "Don't show up tomorrow," with a subtle, dismissive wave of her hand as she returned to her floor plans. But she had no idea what I was preparing. That simple, arrogant wave of her hand, that assumption of control, was the final spark I needed to make the realization. I wasn't just leaving, I was preparing an exit that would expose the lie and force them to face the ugly truth of their choices. My heart was pounding a tight rhythm against my ribs, but my hands remained steady. Ilara's dismissal, her casual confirmation that everything is taken care of, was like a key turning in a lock, giving me access to a level of resolve I hadn't known I possessed. The dominant emotion now was a cold, pure form of betrayal that had crystallized into a plan. I needed to move, and I needed to move fast. That afternoon, while Marcus and Ilara were out, presumably scouting my new, self-contained exile, I began my work. I started by carefully examining the paper trail. The memory of Marcus's voice saying POA was the sound focus, echoing in my ears as I rifled through the desk in the study, the one room she was so eager to repurpose. The drawers were neat, everything alphabetized, reflecting Ilara's precise nature. Hidden beneath a stack of insurance policies, I found the documents, the copies of the power of attorney forms. I ran my fingers over the paper, feeling the familiar, slightly rough texture of the printed pages. The sight of my own signature, neatly forged onto the line just above the notary stamp, didn't shock me, it only confirmed the depth of the deceit. This was a complex, premeditated theft, not a spontaneous act of weakness. But finding the POA wasn't the biggest clue. I also found a bank statement for the condo fund, their joint account. The number at the bottom, the six-figure sum, was slightly more than my entire investment portfolio. This was the first major twist not hinted at in the title. My son and his wife weren't just taking my savings, they were adding their own money to the pot, a considerable sum. Why? This suggested they weren't just securing a small unit for me, they were using my displacement as cover for a much larger, more expensive purchase, leveraging my situation to secure a massive loan. I tucked the copies of the POA and the bank statement into the pocket of my cardigan, feeling the crisp edges of the paper, a discovery of an object that changes everything. I had the evidence. Now, the final step, the exit. I went to my room, pulling out the largest, most inconspicuous suitcase. It was time to pack, not for a storage unit, but for a journey of self-rescue and quiet justice. The weight of the documents in my pocket, the forged POA and the inflated bank statement, felt strangely reassuring, not heavy. They were my shield and my sword. The hours crawled by in a tense, alternating rhythm of quiet dread and focused action. I spent the rest of the afternoon sorting through my belongings, but I wasn't just packing, I was curating my departure. I needed them to believe I had simply gone to the alternative arrangements apartment, yet leave a signal that I knew their secret. I carefully selected the clothes that made up a full life, my good coat, my favorite pair of walking shoes, the jewelry box with the pieces I inherited. I left behind the items they had explicitly called a burden, the sewing machine, the vinyl records, and, most importantly, the boxes of books and papers Ilara wanted out of her study. The goal was to pack enough for survival, but leave enough bulk to appear like I had merely relocated, not disappeared. The sound of the house settling for the evening, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of the refrigerator served as a low, persistent reminder that they would be back soon. I had to finish the most critical part of my plan, the letter. I sat down at the study desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of their expensive, creamy stationery. My hands were perfectly steady. The pen felt cool and light in my grasp, a significant taste-touch detail, marking the beginning of the final act. I wanted the letter to be concise, devoid of any emotional appeal, and utterly devastating. I thought of Ilara's polished, controlling voice and Marcus's cowardice, and the words flowed out, measured and sharp. I addressed the envelope to Marcus, sealing it firmly. I placed the letter in the center of the kitchen island, right where Ilara had placed the floral arrangement this morning, a subtle, full-circle climax returning to the theme of the family betrayal revealed immediately. As I turned to leave, I caught my own reflection in the darkened glass of the kitchen window, a ghostly sight, and for the first time in months, I didn't see a frail old woman. I saw Lydia, the survivor. But that wasn't the last detail I needed to handle before the door clicked shut behind me. I remembered Marcus's fear of exposure, his desire for everything to appear practical and above reproach. My exit needed to be more than just a disappearance, it needed to be a physical threat to their illusion. I knew the final touch had to be something that spoke to their fear of judgment, their need for that perfect facade. I reached into a high cupboard, pulling down a small, heavy vase an antique Alara prized, a gift from her own mother. I carried it carefully into the main hallway, the cool porcelain pressing against my fingers, a final instance of taste touch before the end. The quiet dread in my heart was now replaced by a surprising, resolute calm. I set the suitcase down silently, then walked over to the framed family portrait that hung prominently by the main staircase. Marcus, Alara, and their young son. I lifted the heavy vase, then, without hesitation or violence, I placed it precisely on the floor, directly beneath the portrait. It wasn't broken, it was just deliberately misplaced, a slight, almost imperceptible disruption in their flawless interior design. Then, I turned to my boxes, the ones Alara insisted were the ultimate burden. I opened the one containing my sewing machine, and placed a single, large copy of the forged POA on top, visible to anyone who peered into the box. I was finally ready. I picked up my suitcase, walked to the front door, and let myself out into the deepening twilight. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, the definitive sound of a life closing. I didn't look back at the perfect house, the perfect lawn. I was free of them, but I also knew they wouldn't discover the letter or the evidence immediately. My absence would be the first hint. The discovery of the letter would be the second. And the documents in the box. They were the ticking time bomb. I thought that was the end, until the sudden realization hit me, a new level of shock at hidden truth. I had forgotten my medication. It was still in the bathroom cabinet, prescribed by the doctor Marcus claimed was so concerned about my supervision. A deliberate emotional betrayal had been played. Leaving my medication meant they would have to believe I was either distraught or incapacitated, which would strengthen their control and the lie they told others about my alternative living arrangements. This detail changed everything, turning my clean escape into a vulnerable game of chess. The weight of my oversight, the forgotten medication, settled on me with a sudden, sinking dread. It wasn't just a physical inconvenience, it was the ultimate tool they could use to invalidate my entire departure. They could spin the narrative. Poor Lydia, she left in a panic, forgot her essential prescriptions. She's not thinking straight. The betrayal felt renewed, a subtle trap I had walked into by simply being human. I was out of the house, on the street corner, and the evening air was biting, a cold, sharp taste touch on my cheeks. I had to assume they would be home within the hour. No time to return. I walked quickly, the sound of the suitcase wheels clicking rapidly against the pavement, a nervous sound that seemed amplified in the quiet, affluent neighborhood. I stopped at the edge of the street, taking in the sight of their familiar, large mailbox. It was the perfect stage for the next layer of my plan. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crisp copies of the POA and the bank statement. I walked up to the mailbox and, instead of dropping the documents inside, I meticulously taped them to the underside of the lid, securing them with strong packing tape, ensuring they were hidden from a casual glance but easily accessible to a curious hand checking the mail. The action was small, furtive, driven by a deep sense of quiet dread that they would try to dismiss my claim as the raving of an unmedicated, elderly woman. I needed witnesses, or at least the possibility of them. I left the flag up, a silent invitation for the mailman. I thought that was the end, until the car turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the dusk. It was the familiar black SUV, Marcus and Alara, home early. I threw myself behind the nearest overgrown hedge, feeling the rough, cold leaves pressing against my face. It was the sudden entrance of an unexpected person, the people I was escaping, at the worst possible moment. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against the cold metal of the suitcase handle. I was trapped, relying on the shadow of a suburban shrub to hide the biggest gamble of my life. I sank deeper into the cold, dense leaves of the hedge, The smell of damp earth and crushed foliage strong in my nostrils, a potent taste touch detail. I held my breath, the air burning in my lungs, driven by the intense quiet dread that Marcus would spot the suitcase wheels peeking out. I watched them pull into the driveway. Ilara emerged first, instantly spotting the misplaced vase under the family portrait, which I could see clearly through the large front window. She stopped dead, her perfect posture dissolving into pure shock, and then she quickly ran inside. I heard a muffled, frantic exclamation, the first sound of her facade cracking. Marcus, however, walked slowly to the mailbox. He checked it, lowered the flag, and only then did he notice the tape underneath the lid. He paused, his head cocked, and carefully peeled off the documents I had left. He didn't read them there, he merely glanced at the titles and shoved them into his jacket pocket. The calmness of his action was chilling. He was still in damage control mode, prioritizing secrecy over emotion. He walked into the house, and the front door shut, muffling the rising tension inside. I knew they were focused on the initial shock, the misplaced vase, my absence, and then, the letter. I seized the opportunity. The road was clear. I got up, my muscles stiff and aching from the cold ground, and quickly pulled my suitcase out. I walked down the street, turning the corner sharply, putting distance between me and the silent, beautiful house of horrors. The immediate threat was gone, replaced by a desperate need for sanctuary. My mind went to the one person I could rely on, a person outside of Marcus's and Ilara's social sphere. A long-hidden secret surfacing suddenly was this: my sister, Clara. She lived several states away, and Marcus didn't know we had reconnected recently. My escape wasn't just physical, it was a sudden emotional shock at hidden truth for them. The sound of a passing late-night bus, its brakes hissing, gave me a new focus, a destination. I thought that was the end, until I pulled out my phone to hail a ride and saw a text message, an image sent just minutes ago, from an unknown number. It was a close-up sight of the letter I had left on the kitchen island, unopened, still pristine. How could someone already have access to the house? My controlled departure had just been infiltrated, forcing a re-evaluation of who, exactly, knew the extent of my emotional betrayal. The sight of the text message, the image of my unopened, sealed letter sitting innocently on the kitchen island, sent a wave of freezing shock at hidden truth through me. Someone was inside the house, or had been, and was observing their reaction. I didn't reply to the message. I simply saved the number and quickly hailed a cab, giving the driver the address of the main bus depot downtown. I needed to escape the surveillance radius of their neighborhood. The smell of the old, worn fabric of the cab's backseat, a strong taste touch detail, was a sharp contrast to the antiseptic perfection of Ilara's home. As we drove, I realized the one person who would have easy, unexpected access to their house was the weekly housekeeper, Alia. Ilara treated her poorly. Could Alia be the one, silently watching, using the house keys she possessed to document the scene? The suspicion brought a small, strange feeling of relief or hope, the possibility of an ally, of justice through the back door. I tried to focus on the immediate future. I thought that was the end, until the cab driver, glancing at his rearview mirror, suddenly slowed the car and muttered, "Looks like someone's taking a big interest in you, That black SUV behind us has been tailing us since the depot." The hair on the back of my neck stood up, confirming the immediate physical danger was real. I looked back, and there it was, the familiar, imposing outline of Marcus's black SUV, now pursuing me relentlessly through the city streets. The sight of Marcus's black SUV in the rearview mirror brought the physical danger from theoretical to terrifying reality. I gripped the door handle, the sudden adrenaline rush overriding the cold taste touch of the synthetic cab seat. The cab driver, Omar, pushed the engine into a sudden, forceful roar as he swerved expertly. The chaotic sound of blaring horns and screeching tires was a jarring contrast to the silence of their suburban life, a sudden descent into chaos. As the cab jostled and sped, I realized with fresh shock at hidden truth that Marcus wasn't just following me, he was trying to reclaim me before I could tell anyone what I knew. This chase was the ultimate confirmation of the depth of his betrayal. I leaned forward, thinking fast. Take the next off-ramp, then head to the old central library. But that wasn't the last surprise my son had planned. As we neared the exit ramp, my phone buzzed again. It was another text from the unknown number, but this time, it was a short, coded message: "Go east. Not safe." I didn't know who this ally was, but they were tracking Marcus, and they knew his next move. They warned me, "Don't show up tomorrow at the place Marcus expected me to land," implying he was already anticipating my sister's house. I was forced to abandon my only safe harbor. I told Omar, my voice trembling but firm, "Change of plans. Forget the library. I need the nearest train station heading east out of the state." The stakes had just escalated from a simple escape to a run for survival, driven by the knowledge that my son had anticipated my every move. The rush to the eastbound train station was a blur of heightened betrayal and frantic motion. The cab driver pushed the limits, the SUV a dark, persistent shadow. I gripped the ticket I'd bought to a random, distant city anywhere east of here. I saw a small, crowded coffee kiosk near the platform edge, a perfect spot for a quick, anonymous transaction. As I bought the ticket, I kept my eyes scanning. And then I saw them. Not Marcus, but Ilara. She was standing by the large electronic departure board, her face pale, her expensive coat clashing with the gritty station environment. She was talking rapidly and intensely into a phone, her voice too low to catch, but her body language screaming agitation. The sight of her there confirmed my worst regret and grief. This wasn't just Marcus's cowardly plot. Ilara was fully, actively involved in the search and capture. She was their eyes and ears. I ducked behind a pillar, watching her. Then, I saw Marcus emerge from the ticket hall, walking with the swift, predatory stride of a man on the hunt. He went straight to Ilara, and she quickly pointed in the direction of the long-distance platforms. This moment of misidentification, them chasing a phantom, was my reprieve, a small relief or hope. I thought that was the end, until I saw Ilara hand Marcus a heavy, folded piece of paper. It wasn't the letter I had left, it was a printed document. Marcus quickly unfolded it, and his face went white with fury. It was the original signed POA, the real one, the document that gave them legal control, now being used by someone else. This was the discovery of an object that changes everything, the major twist that fundamentally redirected the story. Someone had not only been in the house, but had swapped the forged copy for the genuine article. My ally, the unknown texter, was playing a dangerous, high-stakes game. And now, Marcus knew his legal foundation was gone. The genuine power of attorney document, now folded and clutched in Marcus's shaking hand, was not merely an object. It was a devastating emotional betrayal of him by someone else, a shocking pivot that left me momentarily frozen behind the pillar. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, far more intense than any frustration he'd shown toward me. The sight of his breakdown was my small, bitter dose of justice. The original POA had been stolen, and the forged copies I had tucked away were just for show. My unknown ally had swapped the legal foundation of his entire scheme. Ilara was whispering frantically to Marcus, her voice tight with panic, a hissing sound that confirmed the immediate high stakes. They were no longer focused on finding me, they were focused on the catastrophic loss of the document. I realized Marcus was about to panic and make a mistake. I turned and slipped onto the regional platform just as the train doors hissed shut. I fumbled for my ticket, my fingers shaking, the sudden loss of adrenaline making me feel cold, a sharp taste touch detail. I found an empty seat and pressed my face against the cool glass, watching the station recede. Marcus and Ilara were running, not toward the train I was on, but back toward the ticket hall, desperate to call someone, a lawyer or a banker. The immediate physical danger was gone, replaced by the profound, creeping sense of quiet dread that my sister, Clara, was now exposed. I thought that was the end, until I remembered the name printed on the back of the real POA document. It wasn't my lawyer's firm. It was the name of the law firm that represented Ilara's powerful and controlling father. The long-hidden secret surfacing suddenly was this. The theft and the entire plot wasn't just Marcus and Ilara. It had the shadow of a much larger, wealthier, and more ruthless family operation behind it. My single, quiet act of revenge was now officially a conflict with a much bigger opponent. The voice on the intercom, cold and official, confirming the mandatory security check and the imminent arrival of police, was the sharpest stab of physical danger yet. I was trapped. The interior lights of the carriage strobed erratically, casting shadows that danced and mocked my fear, a terrifying sight that heightened the feeling of panic. My heart hammered against my ribs, a dull, frantic sound that seemed loud enough to alert the authorities already outside. The betrayal had gone from financial to criminal. Marcus was using the system he had access to, the police, the missing persons reports, to label me and secure my capture. He had leveraged the very structures meant to protect me to trap me. I focused on the one small detail that might save me, the emergency exit window release. I had about 30 seconds before the doors would likely be breached. I thought of the documents Marcus was now claiming I stole. I needed one last piece of evidence, one final message they couldn't ignore. I quickly drafted a lengthy email to the news editor of the local paper in Marcus and Alara's town. I detailed the forged POA, the inflated joint account, the stolen genuine document, and the names of the law firm involved. I attached the text message from my unknown ally, the one with the photo of my letter. The theme of regret and grief for the loss of my son's moral compass was woven into the closing line. I hit send just as I heard the rhythmic crunch of heavy boots on the gravel outside the train. I thought that was the end, until the door to my carriage compartment suddenly hissed open, and standing there, silhouetted against the dark exterior, was not a police officer, but a petite figure wearing a maintenance uniform, holding a heavy toolbox. My unknown ally, the same person who had sent the texts, had walked in at the worst possible moment. The sudden entrance of an unexpected person was the key to my final, desperate escape plan. The woman in the maintenance uniform was Aaliyah, the housekeeper. Her entrance was the ultimate sudden entrance of an unexpected person, but her eyes, wide with a shared quiet dread, confirmed she was the anonymous texter, my ally. The scent of ozone and machine oil was strong on her uniform, a sharp taste touch detail that cut through the fear. She didn't speak, she simply dropped her heavy toolbox with a dull metallic clank, a deliberate sound, and quickly pointed to a small, nearly invisible access panel in the wall just behind my seat. "Hurry," she mouthed. "They'll check the service cars first." Aaliyah's action was the full-circle climax. The family betrayal revealed immediately that this entire confrontation was being observed and countered from within Marcus's own system. I understood her gesture. She was exposing the powerful forces Marcus and Alara had leveraged. I grabbed the edge of the panel she indicated, feeling the rough metal under my fingertips, and pulled hard. It gave way with a screech, revealing a narrow, dark space between the carriages, a terrifying sight of my only way out. "Why?" I whispered, overwhelmed by the depth of her betrayal of Marcus and Alara. "They cut my hours, then they mocked me," she murmured back, her eyes hard. "I saw them forging the documents. They think money makes them invisible." I climbed into the tight, cold duct, the metal scraping against my coat. As I did, Aaliyah shoved a small, heavy piece of metal into my hand, a large, decorative key fob I recognized immediately. "It's to Alara's safe deposit box," she whispered. "The real originals of everything are in there. Don't stop." I had only wanted my freedom, but Aaliyah had given me the final, damning evidence, the discovery of an object that changes everything. She slammed the panel shut just as the door to my compartment rattled open and an authoritative voice barked, "We need you to step out, please." I was gone, hidden in the dark, cramped space, my heart pounding. The stakes had reached level 4, forced ultimate revenge, as I now possessed the key to the total financial ruin of Alara's entire family. I moved through the cramped, oil-scented maintenance duct, relying purely on the rough-taste touch of the cold metal to guide me in the absolute darkness. The sounds were terrifyingly immediate, the police voices barking orders, the frantic sound of Aaliyah's evasive, calm replies just feet away, and the relentless, rhythmic clack-clack-clack of the train wheels. I was clinging to the hope that the dark, tight space would shield me from the blinding flashlights. The key to Alara's safe deposit box felt impossibly heavy in my palm, a small, tangible counterforce to the overwhelming physical danger. The sight of my own daughter-in-law's perfect, deceitful face flashed in my mind, fueling a renewed sense of cold betrayal. I knew what I had to do now. I wasn't running to save my life anymore, I was running to execute the final, definitive destruction of theirs. After an agonizing 20 minutes, the train reached its next major station. I waited until the main surge of passengers had left, then silently pried open the panel and tumbled out onto the platform. I was in a large, unfamiliar city. I took a cab directly to the largest bank branch downtown, the one most likely to have weekend access to safe deposit boxes. I walked in, exhausted but composed. He led me into the sterile vault room, and there, using Alara's key, I opened the box. I wasn't surprised by the contents: the original, genuine POA, the full financial schematics of the condo deal, and a thick file labeled Lydia Settlement. It was the full, organized story of their deep-seated shock at hidden truth. I didn't take the documents. I photographed every single one in high resolution, a meticulous, damning sight of evidence, ensuring the data was synced to my sister Clara's encrypted cloud account. Then, I closed the box, locked it, and returned the key to the teller. I walked out of that bank, physically empty-handed, but carrying the full weight of their destruction on my phone. The final betrayal was a complete circle. My son had called me a burden, so I removed myself. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I left a letter of resignation from their lives, and I took the key to their entire future. The next 3 days were a blur of sustained, cold regret and grief, not for my actions, but for the son I had lost. I had booked a small, anonymous motel room, paying in cash and checking in under a pseudonym. The scent of cheap disinfectant and stale cigarette smoke, a harsh taste touch detail, was my constant companion. I was safe, but the weight of the evidence I carried was immense. My sister, Clara, finally responded to my cryptic email. She confirmed she had fled east, going to a remote cabin we owned. She was worried sick about Alia, but she had secured the files I sent her. This brought a small, profound wave of relief or hope. I wasn't alone, and the evidence was secured by a second party. I spent hours crafting a single, devastating package. I included the bank transaction details, the schematics, and the details of the forged POA. I addressed the package not to the local paper, but to the Regulatory Oversight Division of the state's main banking commission. As I was finishing the package, a news alert flashed on the motel television, a chilling sight. It was a missing person report, concern for elderly woman, Lydia, last name. Maybe experiencing a confused state. They were executing Marcus's plan, painting me as an unstable runaway. The image on the screen was a sickening emotional betrayal. I thought that was the end, until the motel phone rang, a shrill, jarring sound in the quiet room. A voice, tight with panic and barely recognizable, cut through the static. "Mom! Mom, it's Marcus. Please. Just come home. We can fix this. You don't understand the trouble you're in. That key, you need to give it back." Her father, he's serious. This is a physical danger you can't imagine. His voice wasn't laced with love, but with pure, desperate fear. His plea was the ultimate, albeit unintentional, admission of his guilt and the terrifying power of the forces I had challenged. The sudden, raw fear in his voice was the last mini cliffhanger that pushed me forward. I had to mail the package before they could find me. The raw fear in Marcus's voice was the confirmation I needed. My actions were working. His desperate plea was the final emotional betrayal because it wasn't a call for reconciliation, it was a demand for the stolen key. I hung up the phone without saying a word, leaving the shrill sound of the disconnected dial tone in the air. I knew I couldn't stay in the motel another minute. I gathered the tightly sealed package containing the damning evidence and walked out. I walked 3 blocks to a main post office branch. The midday sun felt hot on my skin, a sharp taste touch detail that emphasized my exposed position. I purchased the postage, ensuring the package was sent via registered, certified mail. I watched the postal worker stamp the forms, the sight of the official seals providing the only assurance that the documents were now out of my hands and on their way to dismantle the elaborate lie. With the package secured in the mail system, the immediate physical danger receded. I was a free woman. I bought a ticket for a long-distance bus heading in the opposite direction from Clara's cabin, a deliberate feint to throw off any lingering surveillance. As I waited for the bus, I pulled out my phone and composed a final, private text message to Marcus's direct, personal number. This was my last act of regret and grief. I told him I had already mailed the package. I told him I knew about the forged POA, the stolen genuine document, and his plan to use my health against me. I am no longer your burden, Marcus, I wrote. You asked me to leave. I did. Now you must live with the cost of my departure. Her father's power cannot save you from the truth I have set free. I hit send, then walked onto the waiting bus, found a window seat, and powered off the phone, silencing the possibility of any further contact. Looking out at the street, I saw a familiar black SUV, not Marcus's, but one exactly like it, idling across the street. A tall man was looking towards the bus terminal. I had been found. But it was too late. The final nail was already in the mail. My departure was complete. The sight of that black SUV idling across the street, the final, tangible reminder of the powerful, relentless forces I had just challenged, did not instill quiet dread, it fueled a profound, ice-cold sense of satisfaction. The bus pulled away, the squeal of the air brakes providing a heavy sound that drowned out the world I was leaving behind. I didn't look back. It didn't matter. I had played the long game, leveraging their arrogance against them. My mind went back to the little chip in the ceramic elephant, a calm domestic memory twisted into dread by Marcus's betrayal, but now reclaimed as a symbol of my freedom. I realized the true value of my escape wasn't the money I saved or the revenge I enacted, it was the ability to redefine myself outside of their expectations. I was no longer mom, grandma, or the burden. I was Lydia, the survivor, the woman who took back her own narrative. As the city dissolved into highway and farmland, the overwhelming regret and grief for my relationship with Marcus settled into a quiet, permanent sadness. I sent one last coded email to Clara, confirming my location was safe and instructing her to monitor the news and the banking channels. My work was done. I thought that was the end, until, days later, safely ensconced in the remote cabin with Clara, the television crackled to life. It wasn't the missing person report that shocked me, but a news flash announcing a major internal investigation into regulatory misconduct and asset fraud involving a prominent local law firm, the one connected to Alara's father. The shock at hidden truth was not in the news itself, but in the speed of the fallout. My strategically mailed package had struck faster and harder than I anticipated. The final piece of the puzzle, however, came from Clara, who pointed to the screen with a trembling finger. The lead name on the story, the junior partner being interviewed about the allegations, was Alara's older brother. The family betrayal revealed immediately was now a full-scale catastrophe, engulfing not just Marcus and Alara, but the entire structure of the family that had tried to dispose of me. My quiet departure had not just saved my life, it had cracked an empire. When the love of family is weaponized, the only path to survival is the disciplined pursuit of justice. A life is not measured by the things you are forced to leave behind, but by the dignity you refuse to surrender. If you've ever felt dismissed or devalued by someone you trusted, let me know in the comments. What boundary did you finally draw to reclaim your peace?